Welcome to Zen Drift Sleep, a 3-hour Zen sleep story for deep sleep, insomnia relief, and a calm mind. If you are awake with racing thoughts, you are in the right place. Maybe it is 3 a.m. Maybe the room is dark and quiet, but your mind is loud. Maybe you have tried all the sleep hacks, all the routines, all the advice, and still your thoughts keep circling. Maybe you are simply tired of being tired. Tonight, we begin gently. If it feels right, you can share in the comments where you are listening from. A city, a small town, a quiet room, a night shift, a living room sofa, a bedroom with the door half open. There is something calming in knowing that many people are listening to the same steady story and letting the night soften them in the same way. Now settle your body. If you are in bed, let the mattress hold you. Let the blanket rest over you. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. If you are sitting, let your weight sink into the chair. Feel the surface supporting you. You do not need to do anything perfectly. You do not need to force sleep. This is a sleep story for adults, told slowly, with room for your mind to loosen. Part 1 begins at the night gate. High in the mountains, where the air is colder and the trees grow quiet, there is a small temple known as Moon Mine Temple. It is not famous for gold statues or grand ceremonies. It is known for one simple thing. People who cannot sleep find their way there. They arrive when the world is silent and their mind is not. They come carrying days that will not let go. Worries that keep repeating. Old conversations that replay like echoes. A sense that tomorrow is already on their chest, even though tomorrow has not arrived. At Moon Mine Temple, there is a gate that is never locked, not because the temple expects thieves, but because the temple expects the sleepless. The gatekeeper is an old monk named Beijing. He is not tall. He is not dramatic. He does not speak loudly. He keeps the gate the way a person keeps a lantern, steady, simple, present. Each night, Beijing sits in a small wooden room beside the gate. A kettle rests near a low stove. A candle burns behind a paper screen. The scent of cedar lives in the walls. Outside, the pine trees move softly in the wind, as if the mountain itself is breathing. Most nights are quiet, but some nights, Beijing hears footsteps. Not many footsteps, not a crowd. One set of steps, a hesitant pace. A person who is tired, not only in the body, but in the mind. On one such night, just before the darkest hour, Beijing heard someone walking up the stone path to the gate. The night was cold. The stars were clear. The air had the clean smell that comes after rain. The footsteps stopped. There was a pause, then a gentle knock. Beijing opened the gate without hurry. A traveller stood there, holding a small bag. The traveller's face looked tired in a particular way, like someone who had been awake too long with thoughts that would not settle. Beijing did not ask for a name right away. Instead, he looked at the traveller the way a person looks at a candle that is still burning after midnight, not judging, not rushing, simply seeing. The traveller bowed politely, but the bow was unsteady, like the body was doing the motion while the mind was somewhere else. Beijing spoke softly. "You are awake." The traveller gave a small, embarrassed smile. "Yes," the traveller said. "I have been awake for hours. I thought I would walk until I became tired enough to sleep." Beijing nodded. "Walking helps," he said, "but sometimes the legs become tired before the mind does." The traveller's eyes softened, as if someone finally understood the problem. Beijing stepped aside. "Come in," he said. "The night is cold. The gate is open." The traveller entered the temple grounds. The gate closed behind them, not with a loud sound, but with a quiet wooden click that felt like a small boundary being set. Inside the grounds, the temple was simple. Stone paths, a small pond that reflected the stars, a few wooden buildings with paper windows, the smell of pine, the distant sound of water somewhere in the dark. Bajin led the traveller toward the gatekeeper's room. As they walked, the traveller kept touching the pocket of their coat, as if checking something. Bajin noticed, but he did not comment yet. In the gatekeeper's room, a warm glow waited behind the paper screen. Bajin slid the door open. Inside, everything was calm. A low table, 2 cushions, a kettle steaming quietly, a small shelf with a few cups, no clutter, no noise. Bajin motioned for the traveller to sit. The traveller lowered onto the cushion and exhaled as if their body had been holding itself up for too long. Bajin poured warm tea into a cup and placed it on the table. The tea was plain. It smelled of roasted grain, not fancy, just warm. "Drink," Bajin said. The traveller held the cup with both hands and took a sip. Their shoulders lowered slightly. For a moment, there was no speech, just the sound of tea being swallowed, just the candle flickering behind the screen, just the mountain night holding everything. Then the traveller spoke, almost as if words spilled out before they could be organized. "My mind will not stop," the traveller said. "It keeps running. I keep thinking of tomorrow, of money, of work, of what I did wrong today, of what might happen next week. I try to relax, but then I remember something and my chest tightens again." Bajin listened without interrupting. When the traveller paused, Bajin asked a simple question. "Are you carrying tomorrow in your hands right now?" The traveller blinked, confused. "No," they said. Bajin nodded. "And yet you feel the weight of it." The traveller looked down at their hands. They were empty, but their posture was tense, as if they were holding something heavy anyway. Bajin spoke calmly. "This is why sleeplessness is hard," he said. "The body is in one place. The mind drags heavy things from other places and holds them as if they are here." The traveller looked up. "How do I stop it?" they asked. "I tell myself to stop. I tell myself to calm down. It does not listen." Bajin nodded again, as if he had heard this many times. "Trying to force the mind to be quiet is like trying to force a river to be still," he said. "The more you command it, the more it argues." Bajin poured more tea. Then he asked, "What time is it in your mind?" The traveller frowned. "What do you mean?" Bajin said, "Your body is here, in this room, in this night. But your mind is at work. Your mind is in a conversation that already ended. Your mind is in a future that has not arrived. So tell me, what time is it in your mind?" The traveller's mouth opened, then closed. They understood. "My mind is everywhere," they said quietly. "It is not here." Bajin nodded. "Then we begin with a small return," he said. "Not a big effort. A small return." He placed his hand on the table, palm down. "Put your hand on the table," he said. The traveller did. Bajin asked, "What do you feel?" The traveller hesitated. "The wood is warm," they said, "and smooth." Bajin said, "Good. That is the present moment. Warm wood, smooth surface, a simple fact." The traveller took another sip of tea. Bajin continued. "There is a story we tell at the night gate," he said. "When people arrive awake, we do not ask them to conquer the night. We teach them how to set down what they are carrying." The traveller looked at him with tired interest. Bajin leaned back slightly, letting his voice become slower. "Long ago," he said, "a traveller came to this temple with a sack on his back. The sack was so heavy that the traveller was bent forward as he walked. The traveller had carried it for many miles. The gatekeeper at that time was an old woman, Beijing continued. She watched the traveler approach. She watched the traveler struggle up the path. When the traveler arrived, she said, "You look tired." The traveler said, "I am, but I cannot stop. I have too much to carry." The old woman asked, "What is in the sack?" The traveler said, "Stones." The old woman nodded. "And why do you carry stones?" The traveler said, "I am afraid. If I do not carry them, I will not be safe. I will not be ready." The old woman opened the gate and said, "Come in." She offered tea. She offered warmth. Then she pointed to a stone wall beside the gate. The wall was made of many stones stacked carefully, each one resting on another. She said, "Do you see that wall?" The traveler said, "Yes." She said, "This is where stones belong, not on your back." The traveler said, "But I need them." The old woman said, "You do not need to carry them while you sleep." She placed a wooden box beside the traveler and said, "Put your stones here until morning." The traveler hesitated. The sack felt like safety. The sack felt like identity. The traveler had carried it so long that the traveler did not know what it would feel like to be without it. But the traveler was exhausted. So the traveler opened the sack and began placing stones into the box. One stone was called work. One stone was called money. One stone was called what if. One stone was called regret. One stone was called I should have. One stone was called tomorrow. The box grew heavy. And as the traveler set each stone down, the traveler's shoulders slowly rose back to a natural position. The old woman closed the box. She said, "The stones will still be here in the morning, but you do not have to hold them through the night." Beijing paused. The traveler in Beijing's room sat very still. For the first time in a long time, the traveler felt the idea of putting something down. Beijing looked gently at the traveler. "Do you have stones?" he asked. The traveler swallowed. "Yes," they said. "Many." Beijing said, "Then we use the same practice." He reached to a shelf and brought down a small wooden box, simple and plain. He placed it on the floor beside the traveler. The traveler stared at it. Beijing said, "You do not have to tell me everything. You do not have to explain your whole life, but you can name what you are carrying, quietly, to yourself, and you can place it here for the night." The traveler hesitated, then spoke softly. "Work," they whispered, and in their mind, they imagined placing that stone into the box. "Family," they whispered. Another stone. "Health," they whispered. Another stone. "Money," they whispered. Another stone. "Tomorrow," they whispered. Another stone. As the traveler named each one, something in their chest loosened. Not completely, but enough to feel a difference. Beijing did not rush them. When the traveler finished, Beijing closed the box lid. He did it gently, as if he were closing a book. "The stones will not disappear," he said, "but you do not need to carry them right now." The traveler exhaled. They looked slightly surprised by how much relief came from a simple act of naming. Beijing said, "The mind becomes quieter when it is not wrestling in the dark. It becomes quieter when you stop pretending you are not holding anything." The traveler nodded. Then the traveler glanced again at the pocket they had been touching earlier. Beijing finally asked, "What are you checking?" The traveler looked embarrassed. "My phone," they admitted. "I keep checking it. I know I should not, but I do. It feels like if I do not check it, something will happen." Beijing nodded slowly. "The glowing slate," he said. Using an old temple phrase, the traveler looked puzzled. Beijing said, "Long ago people came to the night gate carrying letters, worrying about messages. Now people carry a bright screen, that can summon the whole world at any hour. It makes the mind busy. It makes the night bright when the night is meant to be dark. The traveler looked down, ashamed. Beijing shook his head gently. Not shame, he said, just noticing. The traveler took another sip of tea. Beijing continued. There is another reason 3 a.m. feels so heavy, he said. At 3 a.m., the mind believes every thought is urgent. It believes every worry is true. It believes every fear is prophecy. The traveler's eyes widened, because this was exactly how it felt. Beijing said, but at 3 a.m. the mind is tired. It is not wise. It is not seeing clearly. It is only scanning. The traveler asked, so what do I do when my mind runs like that? Beijing answered, you do what a gatekeeper does. You do not wrestle every visitor. You simply decide what enters and what does not. The traveler listened. Beijing held up one finger, not as a command, but as a simple marking of a step. The first step is to notice, he said. You already do this. You notice my mind is racing. You notice my chest is tight. That noticing is important. He held up a second finger. The second step is to name without feeding, he said. Not to tell the whole story, just to name. Worry, planning, remembering, fear, that is all. Naming is like turning on a small lamp. It changes the room. He held up a third finger. The third step is to soften, he said. Not to force calm, just to soften the body around the thought. The traveler asked, how? Beijing said, like this. He took a slow breath in and let the breath out longer than the breath in. Not dramatically, not loudly, just longer. The traveler copied him. Beijing said, when the exhale lengthens, the body receives a signal. The danger is not here. We can release. The traveler took another long exhale. Their shoulders dropped another small amount. Beijing said, this is a 3 a.m. reset. It is not magic. It is not a hack. It is simply the body remembering it can come out of alarm. The traveler sat quietly. Outside, the wind moved through pine needles. Somewhere in the dark, a night bird called once, then stopped. Beijing said, now listen to something. The traveler looked up. Beijing tapped the side of the wooden table, very lightly. Tap, tap, tap. It is a small sound, Beijing said, but you can hear it. The traveler nodded. Beijing said, your mind hears what it listens for. At 3 a.m., the mind listens for threat. It listens for unfinished tasks. It listens for danger. The traveler's face softened again. It felt true. Beijing said, we teach the mind to listen for something else. Warm tea, a quiet room, a slow breath, the weight of the blanket, the simple fact that you are here now. The traveler's gaze drifted down to their hands again. They realized they were not gripping. They were resting. Beijing poured a little more tea. Do you want to hear the temple rule about sleep? He asked. The traveler smiled faintly. Yes, they said. Beijing said, we do not chase sleep. The traveler waited. Beijing continued, sleep is like a cat. If you chase it, it runs. If you make a quiet place and sit down, it may come and curl up beside you. The traveler let out a small breath that almost became a laugh. It was the first lightness they had felt all night. Beijing said, so we make the quiet place. He looked around the room. The candle is small. The tea is warm. The night is holding everything. You do not need to solve your life tonight. The traveler asked, but what if my mind starts again when I lie down? Beijing said, then you return again. The traveler frowned, tired of repetition, tired of returning. Beijing understood. He said, a river does not reach the ocean in one push. It moves by continuing. The traveller's eyes grew heavy for a moment. Beijing continued, "Returning is not failure. Returning is the path." He added, "Even if you return 100 times." The traveller sat quietly. Something in their face softened into a kind of acceptance. Not that everything was fine, but that the night did not need to be fought. Beijing stood slowly. "Come," he said. "I will show you the room where sleeplessness is treated like a guest, not an enemy." The traveller stood as well, moving like someone who had been awake too long, but with less panic in the body. They stepped back out into the temple grounds. The stars were still overhead. The air felt colder, but the traveller felt warmer inside. Baijin walked along a stone path lit by small lanterns. Each lantern was dim, like a firefly held in glass. The light was enough to guide, but not enough to stir the mind. As they walked, Beijing said, "People often think sleep comes from effort, but sleep comes from safety. The temple makes safety through small things: quiet, darkness, simplicity." The traveller nodded. They reached a wooden hallway. At the entrance was a small shelf. On the shelf was a woven basket. Beside it, a simple sign painted in ink. The traveller leaned closer to read it. It said, "Let the glowing slate sleep." The traveller's hand went to their pocket automatically. Baijin did not scold. He only said, "This is where the second hall begins." The traveller looked up. Baijin's voice was soft. "In the next part of our journey, we will step into the room where screens rest, where notifications do not enter, where the night returns to darkness." He held out the basket. "For now," he said, "place it here, just for a while. Let your mind remember what night feels like when it is not interrupted." The traveller's fingers closed around the phone. They hesitated, then slowly they placed it into the basket. The sound was small, a soft tap, but the moment felt large. Beijing nodded, and the temple hallway opened into deeper quiet. The traveller stood in the lantern-lit hallway, staring at the woven basket as if it were a small cliff edge. The phone rested inside it now. Quiet, dark, no glow, no buzzing, no little red numbers calling for attention. Baijin watched the traveller for a moment, and then nodded, as if acknowledging a courageous act. Not dramatic courage, the quiet kind, the kind that is simply choosing rest. The hallway was long and made of wood that had been polished by decades of feet. Lanterns hung at intervals, their light dim and warm. Not bright enough to wake the mind, just enough to guide the body. Beijing walked slowly, letting the traveller's breath catch up. At the end of the hallway was a wide sliding door with a simple sign painted in ink. It read, "The Hall of Quiet Darkness." Beijing slid the door open. The room beyond was spacious and simple. The floor was clean. A few cushions were placed in a loose circle. A kettle sat near a small stove. A long table stood along one wall with a row of woven baskets, each one holding a glowing slate that had been set down. Along the opposite wall were paper windows, but the paper was thicker than usual, so moonlight entered softly, not sharply. The room felt like it had been built for the nervous system, not for the eyes. A few people were already there, not talking, not performing, just sitting. Some had their eyes closed. Some looked down at their hands. Some stared gently at the floor, as if listening to their own breath without forcing it. Beijing guided the traveller to an empty cushion. The traveller sat down. The cushion felt firm in a comforting way, like it would not swallow the body, but would hold it steady. Beijing sat across from the traveller, then spoke quietly. "This is where we practice the phone-free bedtime," he said, using the modern words without any judgment. Not because phones are evil, not because the world is wrong, but because the night has its own rhythm, and the mind sleeps better when the rhythm is respected. The traveler looked down, embarrassed again. I always tell myself I will stop, the traveler whispered. But then I scroll, I check, I read, I watch. I think I am relaxing, but my eyes stay bright, and my mind stays awake. Beijing nodded. The bright screen is a clever thing, he said. It promises comfort, but it often keeps the mind alert. It is like drinking tea at midnight and asking why the heart is beating fast. The traveler took a slow breath. Beijing continued. Some people call it blue light, he said. Some call it stimulation. Some call it habit. But the simplest truth is this. The night is made for dimness. He looked around the hall, then back to the traveler. In this hall, we let the night be night. A soft sound came from the corner. Someone was setting a phone into one of the baskets. The screen flashed once, then went dark. A small vibration happened, then stopped, as if the device itself had to accept the boundary. Bajin did not correct the person. He did not say anything. The hall held it quietly. The traveler looked up. More people were arriving. Each one walked in slowly, like they were already tired. One person wore a work jacket and held their phone like a shield. Another person wore headphones around the neck and kept tapping their pocket. Another person had a small pouch of sleep gear clipped to their bag, like they had been trying everything to get relief. A younger monk named Hara, who helped in the hall, greeted them with a bow. He spoke softly, pointing to the baskets. The visitors hesitated. Then, one by one, they set their devices down. Each time, the sound was small. Tap, tap, tap. Each time, the room became slightly quieter, as if 1,000 invisible threads were being cut. The traveler watched this and felt less alone. Beijing said, "Do you know why this is hard?" The traveler shrugged. "Because I am addicted." Beijing shook his head gently. "Not shame," he said. "Not labels. Look deeper." He spoke slowly, as if choosing every word so it would not startle. Your mind does not check the phone because it is evil. Your mind checks the phone because it is restless, because it is anxious, because it is trained to scan for information. He paused, and the phone feeds that training. The traveler looked down. Beijing said, "Most people think their mind is noisy because they are broken, but often the mind is noisy because it is never allowed to be quiet. It is fed noise all day, then expected to become silent on command." He poured tea into 2 cups and slid one toward the traveler. The traveler held it with both hands. The warmth helped. Baijin continued. "In the old days," he said, "people came to the night gate carrying letters. They worried about news from the village. They worried about messages. But letters were slow. The night had space." He glanced at the baskets. Now the whole world fits in a pocket. News, anger, comparison, work, family, money, fear, all of it. And the mind thinks it must keep up with everything. The traveler nodded. "It feels like if I do not check, something bad will happen." Beijing said, "Yes, that feeling is the nervous system saying, stay alert, stay ready." He took a slow breath in. Then he let the breath out longer. The traveler copied him without thinking. Beijing said, "A calm mind begins here, not in the phone, not in information, in the body remembering safety." The traveler's shoulders lowered. Beijing looked around the hall again, then spoke as if speaking to everyone, but softly enough that it felt personal. "In this hall, we do not fight the mind," he said. "We do not punish it. We do not shame it. We guide it." Hara, the younger monk, walked quietly around the room and placed small cloth eye covers in a basket by the door for for anyone who wanted them. He placed a few simple yellow-tinted glasses beside them, a practical tool for those who were sensitive to bright light. But he did not advertise. He simply made them available, the way a temple makes blankets available. One visitor picked up the glasses and slipped them on, relieved. Another visitor did not. Both were fine. Beijing noticed the traveler watching. He said, "Tools can help, but the deeper tool is always attention." The traveler asked, "Does everyone really sleep here?" Beijing answered honestly, "Not always," he said, "but everyone becomes quieter. And the quieter you become, the easier sleep becomes." He spoke as if remembering something. "There is a story we tell here," Beijing said. "It is older than the glowing slate, but it fits the glowing slate perfectly." The traveler leaned in slightly. Beijing began. "Long ago, a monk named Xiaoyu lived in this temple. He was a good monk. He worked hard. He studied. He meditated. But his mind was restless at night. One evening, he went to the abbot and said, 'Master, my mind will not settle. I try to meditate, but thoughts keep jumping. I try to sleep, but I keep thinking.' The abbot asked, 'What do you do before you sleep?' Xiaoyu said, 'I read scrolls. I talk with people. I think about what I should do tomorrow. I look at the lantern light until my eyes get heavy.' The abbot nodded. Then the abbot took Xiaoyu to the pond outside the temple. It was a calm night. The pond reflected the moon. The abbot said, 'Look.' Xiaoyu looked and saw the moon's reflection shining on the water, clear and bright. Then the abbot picked up a stick and stirred the pond. The reflection broke into shaking light, scattered and distorted. The abbot asked, 'Where did the moon go?' Xiaoyu said, 'It is still there, but the water is moving.' The abbot said, 'Exactly. The moon does not leave, but when the water is stirred, it cannot reflect clearly.' Xiaoyu asked, 'What stirs my water?' The abbot said, 'Everything you feed your mind right before sleep. Every argument, every worry, every bright thing, every story that makes your heart race.' Xiaoyu said, 'So I should force the water to be still.' The abbot smiled and said, 'Do not force the pond. Stop stirring it.' The abbot brought Xiaoyu back to the temple. He removed the lantern from Xiaoyu's room and replaced it with one small candle. He asked Xiaoyu to stop reading scrolls at night. He asked Xiaoyu to stop discussing temple politics after sunset. He asked Xiaoyu to stop trying to solve tomorrow at midnight. And most of all, he asked Xiaoyu to sit in darkness for a few minutes before bed, letting the mind feel what night feels like. At first, Xiaoyu resisted. The darkness felt empty. The quiet felt uncomfortable. It felt like something was missing, because Xiaoyu had been using noise to cover restlessness. But the abbot said, "Stay. Stay with the quiet. Stay with the small discomfort. Let the water settle." And slowly, night by night, Xiaoyu's mind became less stirred. He did not become a saint. He still had thoughts, but the thoughts became softer, like leaves floating on water instead of stones thrown into it. And one night, Xiaoyu fell asleep without noticing the moment he fell asleep. Bajin finished the story and let silence return. The traveler held the warm cup and felt the meaning. Stop stirring it, not force it, not fight it. Just stop stirring. The traveler said quietly, "But my work messages come at night. My family texts, my group chats." Beijing nodded. "Yes, life is not always simple," he said. "So we create boundaries where we can." He gestured toward the baskets. "This is one boundary." The traveler looked at the baskets again. Beijing continued. "There is another practice," he said, "a small one, for people who feel compelled to check. The traveller looked up. Beijing said, "We call it the last lantern." He reached to the shelf and took a small paper card. On the card, written in neat ink, were 3 lines. Is it urgent? Is it important? Is it kind? Beijing placed the card in front of the traveller. He said, "If you feel the impulse to check, you can ask these questions first. Most notifications are not urgent. Many are not important. Some are not kind. Your nervous system does not need to drink them at midnight." The traveller smiled faintly. It felt practical, not preachy. Beijing said, "And if something truly urgent exists, the world has ways of reaching you. People knock, people call, people come to the gate. The mind does not need to scan constantly." The traveller said, "It feels like I will miss something." Beijing said, "Yes, you will miss something." The traveller stiffened. Beijing continued gently, "You will miss noise." The traveller exhaled. Beijing said, "And in missing noise, you will find rest." One of the visitors in the hall raised a hand slightly, like asking a question without wanting attention. Beijing looked at them kindly. The visitor said, "I use earbuds, sleep earbuds. It helps me. Is it wrong?" Beijing shook his head. "Not wrong," he said. "If it helps you, use it. But do not turn it into a new worry. Do not become a judge of yourself. The goal is calm, not perfection." He added, "Some people like brown noise. Some like rain. Some like a fan. Some like silence. The temple has a river sound outside. We do not argue with what helps the body relax." The visitor nodded, relieved. The traveller noticed how Beijing did not turn everything into rules. It felt like an adult room, a room that understood people. Beijing looked back at the traveller. "Many people who cannot sleep are fighting their nervous system," he said. "They want the mind to stop, but the body is still in alert. So we do simple things. Darkness, warmth, slow exhale, no bright screen. We let the system downshift." The traveller asked, "How long does it take?" Beijing answered, "Longer than a click." The traveller almost laughed, because it was true. Beijing continued, "But shorter than a war." The traveller nodded, because that was true too. Beijing stood up slowly and moved toward the baskets. He opened one basket and removed a phone, not to take it, but to show it. The screen lit up, and immediately the traveller's eyes were drawn to it, almost involuntarily. Beijing noticed. He said, "See, the mind is trained. It looks automatically." He tapped the screen and turned it off. Dark again. He placed it back in the basket. He said, "This is not your fault. It is training. And training can be changed." The traveller said, "I feel like my brain is different now. Short attention, always reaching. I used to read books." Beijing nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. "Many people feel this. The mind becomes used to quick reward, quick novelty, endless scroll. It is not a moral failure. It is habit, and habit can be softened." He sat down again. Then he told another story very slowly, as if his voice itself was meant to be a blanket. "There was once a fisherman," he said, "who lived by a lake. One day, he found a net made of silver thread. It was light in his hands, but it caught everything. He threw it into the water and pulled it back, and it was full of fish. Not only fish, little treasures, shells, coins, rings, strange things from the bottom. He was amazed. He threw it again. More fish, more treasures. Soon he stopped fishing with his old net. He used only the silver net. At first he became rich. But after a while, he could not stop throwing it. Even when his basket was full, even when he had enough, he kept throwing. He kept pulling. He kept searching for what would come up next. One night, he tried to sleep. but his hands kept moving in the air as if pulling an invisible net. He dreamed of the lake. He woke and checked the basket. He could not rest. So he went to an old woman who lived near the shore and asked for help. The old woman asked, "What do you do all day?" He said, "I throw the silver net." The old woman said, "Then you are still throwing it when you lie down." He said, "But I am not." She said, "Your hands are not, but your mind is." She took him to the lake at night. The surface was still. She said, "Look." He looked and saw the moon reflected perfectly. Then she threw the silver net into the lake. The net disturbed the surface. The moon's reflection broke into shaking fragments. She pulled the net out. Then she said, "Now do not throw it." He said, "But what if there is treasure?" She said, "What if there is sleep?" He stood there, restless, wanting to throw it again. Then the old woman said, "Put the net down for one night. If you survive, you will know you never needed it to survive." So the fisherman folded the silver net and left it on the shore. He walked home with empty hands. At first his mind screamed, "Where is the net? What if something happens? What if I miss something?" But then slowly the mind grew tired. And in the tiredness, something else appeared. The sound of wind, the smell of lake water, the weight of his own body in the bed. He slept. In the morning, he woke and laughed, because the world had not ended. And the old woman said, "Now you understand. The net is useful, but you are not the net. You can choose when to hold it and when to put it down." Beijing finished and looked at the traveler. The traveler understood the story was not really about a net. Beijing said, "The phone is a net. It catches many things, some useful, some not. But if you throw it into your mind at midnight, it will stir your water." The traveler said, "So the practice is just putting it down?" Beijing said, "Yes, and noticing what happens inside when you put it down." The traveler asked, "What if I feel anxious?" Beijing said, "Then you feel anxious, and you do not run from the feeling into the net." He added, "You let the feeling rise, and you notice it is a wave, and like all waves, it passes." The traveler looked at the floor. "I do run," they admitted. "I scroll when I feel lonely." Beijing nodded. "Most people do," he said. He looked around at the other visitors. Some people scroll to avoid sadness, some to avoid fear, some to avoid emptiness. But emptiness is not always bad. Sometimes emptiness is space. Space is where rest begins. The traveler breathed out slowly. Beijing said, "We call this hall the digital detox temple sometimes, because people come here to rest from constant input. But the true detox is not only the phone. It is the habit of reaching for something every time you feel something." The traveler said, "So what do I reach for instead?" Beijing said, "The simplest thing." The traveler waited. Beijing said, "The breath." The traveler's face tightened slightly, like they had heard this too many times. Beijing smiled, as if expecting their reaction. He said, "Not as a technique, as a place." He placed a hand gently on his own chest, then on the table. He said, "This breath is here, always. It does not demand you be interesting. It does not judge you. It does not require you to perform. It simply arrives. It leaves. It returns." The traveler took a breath. Beijing continued, "And the breath brings you back to what is real. Warm tea, wooden floor, quiet lantern, the sound of a kettle, the night outside. All of this is real, and it is enough." A long silence followed. In that silence, one visitor's stomach made a small sound. No one laughed. No one turned. The room simply held it. The traveller felt something begin to unclench. Beijing spoke again, very softly. "This is why a calm sleep story helps," he said. "It gives your mind something gentle to rest on that is not a bright net. It is story as a cushion, and when the mind is held, it lets go." The traveller asked, "Do you ever miss the phone?" Beijing nodded. "Sometimes," he said. "And when I miss it, I notice the missing. I do not fill it immediately. I sit with it." The traveller said, "And then what?" Beijing said, "And then the missing changes into something else." The traveller waited. Beijing said, "Often it changes into tiredness, or quiet, or a memory, or a simple grief. And when it is allowed, it passes." The traveller took another sip of tea. Beijing continued, "People think digital detox sleep means you must become perfect. No screens ever, no mistakes, no late nights. But the truth is simpler. We practice choosing the night more often than not." He gestured to the hall. "This is practice, not a performance." Hara walked quietly to the stove and added a small piece of wood. The fire crackled once, then settled. The warmth spread gently. Beijing said, "Now, I will show you something else." He stood and guided the traveller to the paper window. He lifted a small flap so the traveller could see outside without letting in too much light. The traveller looked out. The pond reflected the moon. The surface was still. The reflection was clean. Beijing said, "This is your mind when it is not stirred." The traveller watched. Beijing lowered the flap again. He said, "Now we go to the sleeping rooms. But first, one more step." They returned to the cushion. Beijing asked, "When you set the phone down, what did you feel?" The traveller thought. "At first, panic," they admitted, "then relief, then a strange emptiness, like I did not know what to do with my hands." Beijing nodded. "That is normal," he said. "Your hands are used to holding. Now they will learn to rest." He said, "This is a skill, like learning to swim. At first you flail, then you float." The traveller asked, "What if I wake at 3 a.m. again?" Beijing said, "You may." The traveller sighed. Beijing continued, "If you do, remember this hall. Remember the basket. Remember the pond. Remember that 3 a.m. thoughts are loud but not wise." He added, "And if you must check something, check the body first. Check the jaw. Check the shoulders. Check the breath. Many times, the body is only asking for softness." The traveller nodded. Beijing said, "Now, let us go to where people sleep." They stood and walked quietly out of the hall. As they passed the baskets, the traveller glanced once, as if tempted. Beijing did not correct them. He only walked, steady. They moved down another hallway, even dimmer than before. At the end was a room with several sleeping mats arranged neatly, each with a folded blanket. The air was clean and cool. The room smelled faintly of dried herbs. Beijing pointed to an empty mat. The traveller sat down. Beijing said, "Lie down when you are ready." The traveller hesitated, then said, "Will you tell me another story?" Beijing nodded. "In the temple, we do not force sleep," he said. "We invite it." He sat at the far end of the room, not too close, not too far, like a guard who watches without pressure. He began speaking, slow and low, but before he started the next story, the traveller noticed something on the wrist of a man lying on the mat nearby. A small glowing ring, not as bright as a phone, but a small light. The man tapped it once, as if checking something. Then he sighed, restless. Beijing noticed too. He did not scold. He only said softly, almost to himself, "Some people put down the glowing slate, but keep holding the numbers." The traveller looked at him, curious. Beijing's voice became a whisper. In the next hall, we will meet the ones who chase perfect sleep, he said. The ones who measure the night and become anxious about the score. He paused. For now, rest. The traveller's eyes grew heavy. The room was dim. The phone was far away. The mountain held the temple in silence. And the next part waited quietly, like a door not yet opened. The traveller lay on the mat, eyes half open, listening to the quiet breathing of strangers in the dark. The mountain wind moved softly outside the walls. Somewhere in the temple, a kettle clicked as it cooled. And then the traveller saw it again. A small glow on the wrist of the man on the mat nearby, not bright like a phone, but bright enough to pull the eye. The man lifted his wrist, tapped the glowing ring, stared for a moment, and sighed as if the night itself had judged him. Baijin sat at the far end of the room, still and patient. He had seen this many times. Some people put down the glowing slate, but keep holding the numbers. The traveller swallowed and whispered, careful not to wake anyone. What numbers? Beijing's voice came back low, like a blanket pulled up. The numbers that claim to measure rest, he said. The numbers that promise certainty. Sleep score, deep sleep, recovery, readiness, the little verdicts people carry into the morning. The traveller lay still. The man with the ring shifted again. He seemed unable to settle. Beijing watched him for a moment longer, then stood with slow, quiet steps and crossed the room. He did not approach like an authority. He approached like a caretaker. He knelt beside the man's mat and spoke softly. Friend, Beijing said, you are awake. The man sighed. Yes, he admitted. I am awake because I should be asleep. Beijing nodded, as if that sentence contained the whole problem. And why should you be asleep? Beijing asked. The man lifted his wrist again. The glow reflected faintly in his eyes. My ring says I need more deep sleep, he whispered. It says I am not recovering. It says my body is under strain. I can feel it. I can feel the pressure now, like I am failing at sleep. Baijin looked at the ring, but he did not criticize it. He simply said, And how do you feel after reading that? The man hesitated. Tense, he admitted. Worried. I start thinking about my health, my heart, my brain, my future. I start thinking, what if I never fix this? Beijing nodded. So the ring measures rest, he said, and it gives you worry. The man looked down. Beijing placed one hand gently on the wooden floor, as if grounding himself before speaking. There is a kind of insomnia that comes from fear, he said, and there is a kind of insomnia that comes from chasing. The man frowned. Chasing what? Perfect sleep, Beijing said. Perfect numbers. Perfect nights. Perfect recovery. People chase the idea of deep sleep the way they chase a cat, and the cat keeps moving away. The man's face tightened. But the numbers matter, he whispered. They say sleep affects everything. Memory, mood, weight, blood pressure, aging. Beijing did not argue. He said, sleep matters, yes, but what else matters? The man stared. Beijing answered for him. Peace matters. Quiet matters. The nervous system matters. And fear is the enemy of sleep. The man looked away, embarrassed. Beijing said, If you want insomnia relief, you cannot treat sleep like a test. The traveller listened from the mat, feeling the words land somewhere deep. Beijing asked the man, What is your name? The man hesitated, then said, Seongho. Beijing nodded. Seongho, he said, do you want to walk with me for a moment? Seongho looked around. The room was quiet. People were sleeping. He did not want to disturb anyone, but he also did not want to keep tossing and stirring the air with his anxiety. He sat up slowly and followed Beijing out into the hallway. The traveler watched them go, then closed their eyes again, listening. A few minutes later, soft footsteps returned. Beijing did not bring Xiongho back into the sleeping room right away. Instead, he led him to a small side room near the pond. It was a room with a single candle and a low bench. The paper window looked out onto the still water. Beijing motioned for Xiongho to sit. Xiongho sat down and rubbed his face with both hands. "I was sleeping fine before I bought this ring," he said quietly. "Or maybe I was not. I do not know. But now I know too much. I know every night is good or bad. I know whether I am getting deep sleep or not. I know when my heart rate is high. I know when my recovery is low, and I cannot stop checking." Beijing nodded. He said, "This is the sleep tracker trap." Xiongho looked up. Beijing continued, "A tracker can be useful, but for many people, it becomes a new form of control. They try to control the night with numbers, and the more they control, the more anxious they become. And anxiety is a thief. It steals rest." Xiongho stared at the candle. "I just wanted to be healthy," he whispered. "I want to live long. I want my mind to stay sharp. I want to avoid disease. Everyone says sleep is the foundation, so I thought I should optimize it." Beijing heard the word optimize and smiled slightly. Not mocking, only recognizing. "Many people are trying to optimize everything," he said. "Steps, calories, heart rate, sleep, even calm. They try to turn the body into a machine with a dashboard." Xiongho swallowed. "It feels responsible," he said. Beijing nodded. "It begins that way," he said. "Then it becomes a prison." Beijing stood and lifted the window flap slightly. Moonlight reflected on the pond. He said, "Look." Xiongho looked. The moon's reflection was clear and steady. Beijing asked, "Would you like to measure that reflection?" Xiongho frowned. "What?" Beijing said, "Imagine you try to measure the moon's reflection every night. You keep a notebook. You rate its brightness. You rate its clarity. You count the ripples. You worry if the reflection looks slightly different. You wake and ask, was it perfect?" Xiongho stared. Beijing said, "What happens to your mind?" Xiongho answered quietly, "It becomes busy." Beijing said, "And what happens to the pond?" Xiongho understood. He looked down at his own hands. "I would stir it," he said. Beijing nodded. "You would stir it," he repeated, "and then you would complain that the reflection is not clear." Xiongho's chest tightened as he recognized himself. Beijing spoke gently. "A tracker can be like a stick stirring the pond. You poke the night, you poke the mind, you poke the body, asking, are you doing it right? And then you wonder why stillness is gone." Xiongho's eyes grew wet, not from sadness exactly, but from exhaustion. "I am tired," he said. "Not only tired, I am afraid. I am afraid of being unhealthy. I am afraid of getting older. I am afraid that if I do not control this, something will happen." Beijing sat down beside him on the bench. He said, "Do you remember the king who wanted to cover his kingdom in leather?" Xiongho nodded faintly. He had heard the story before. Beijing said, "He thought if the ground became soft, the feet would never hurt. But the wise advisor said, 'Cover your feet.'" He looked at Xiongho's ring. "Tonight, you are trying to cover the entire kingdom," he said. "You are trying to control every inch of the night. But the wise path is simpler. Cover your feet. Calm your nervous system. Put down the measuring." Xiongho whispered, "But how do I trust my body?" Beijing said, "We begin with something small." He reached into his robe and pulled out a thin cloth. He handed it to Xiongho. Xiongho looked confused. Beijing said, "This is a cover for the ring." Xiongho blinked. "A cover." Beijing nodded. You can wear the ring, he said. You can let it record if you want, but you do not have to look at the numbers now. You do not have to drink the data at midnight. Seong-ho stared at the cloth. It sounds silly, he said. Baijin said, so does chasing a cat, until you are exhausted. Seong-ho held the cloth and looked down at his ring again. Baijin said, in this temple, we have a rule about numbers. Seong-ho looked up. Baijin said, numbers are for daylight. Seong-ho let out a breath that almost became a laugh. Baijin continued, at night, we do not measure. At night, we receive. Seong-ho slowly wrapped the cloth over the ring, covering the glow. The light disappeared. The room looked darker. Seong-ho's face softened as if something in his nervous system unclenched. Baijin said, now tell me what you feel. Seong-ho paused. Relief, he admitted, and also a strange panic, like I am losing control. Baijin nodded. That is the habit, he said. The habit that says control equals safety. But in the night, control often equals tension. He pointed gently at Seong-ho's chest. Your breath knows how to sleep, he said. Your body knows how to recover. It has done it since you were a child. You were not born with a dashboard. Seong-ho looked down. Baijin continued, let me tell you a story. Seong-ho's eyes closed slightly. The tone of Baijin's voice was already calming. Baijin began. Long ago there was a monk named Jinhwa who lived at Moonmine Temple. Jinhwa was a good monk. He followed the rules. He worked hard, but he worried. He worried about doing practice correctly. He worried about breathing correctly. He worried about posture. He worried about whether he was making progress. One day, a traveler brought a strange gift to the temple. It was a small device, not unlike your ring. It could count breaths. It could count heartbeats. It could record how long someone sat still. Jinhwa was fascinated. He thought, now I can know if my practice is working. So he began to measure himself. He counted how many breaths were slow. He counted how many heartbeats were calm. He counted how long he could sit without moving. At first, he felt proud. He had numbers. He had proof. But soon, the numbers became a judge. If his breath was faster, he panicked. If his heartbeat was high, he scolded himself. If he moved, he felt like a failure. Practice became a test, and every test created fear. Then Jinhwa began measuring his sleep. He began checking the device the moment his eyes opened. If the number was good, he felt happy. If the number was bad, he felt anxious. And the anxiety itself made the next night worse. Soon he was trapped in a loop. One night he went to the abbot and said, Master, I think I am losing my mind. I am doing everything right, but I am sleeping worse. The numbers are telling me I am not recovering. I am afraid. The abbot listened quietly. Then the abbot asked, Who taught you to sleep? Jinhwa said, My parents, I suppose, when I was a child. The abbot said, Did your parents give you a device? Jinhwa said, No. The abbot asked, Then how did you sleep? Jinhwa said, I do not know. I just did. The abbot nodded. The abbot took Jinhwa to the pond at night. The pond was still. The moon's reflection was clear. The abbot said, Do you see the moon? Jinhwa said, Yes. The abbot said, Now measure it. Jinhwa frowned, confused. The abbot handed Jinhwa the device and said, Measure the moon's reflection. Measure its brightness. Measure its stillness. Jinhwa stared at the pond. He raised the device. And in doing so, his body leaned forward. His breath tightened. His mind became busy. The abbot said, What happened to your breath? Jinhwa said, It became tight. The abbot said, And what happened to the pond? Jinhua looked closer and saw small ripples spreading. His movement had disturbed the water. The abbot said, "The moon did not change. The pond did not betray you. The measuring stirred it." The abbot took the device from Jinhua's hand and placed it in a box. He said, "The device is not evil, but you are not ready to hold it wisely. You are using it like a weapon against yourself." He looked at Jinhua and said, "Tonight you will sleep without measuring. Tomorrow you may measure if you must, but you will not worship the number." Jinhua asked, "How will I know if I recovered?" The abbot said, "You will know by your life. You will know by your mood. You will know by your body. You will know by how you treat people. You will know by whether you can sit calmly with discomfort. A number can inform, but it cannot become your identity." And then the abbot said something Jinhua never forgot. He said, "If you want deep sleep, do not dig for it." Jinhua said, "What?" The abbot said, "The deeper you dig, the more you disturb the ground. Sleep rises like water in soil. It rises when you stop tearing the earth apart." Jinhua stopped measuring at night. At first it was uncomfortable. He felt naked without numbers. But slowly the mind softened, and one night he slept. Not because he forced it, but because he stopped fighting it. Baijin finished the story. Xiongho sat quietly, breathing slower without trying. Baijin said, "Do you understand the trap?" Xiongho nodded. "I am using it like a weapon," he whispered. "I am scaring myself." Baijin said, "Yes, you are turning sleep into a contest." Xiongho looked down. "And if you lose a contest," Baijin continued, "you feel shame, and shame keeps you awake." Xiongho whispered, "But I want to do better." Baijin nodded. "There is nothing wrong with wanting to be healthy," he said. "But health is not achieved by fear. Health is supported by gentleness." He added, "Your body does not sleep better when you threaten it." Xiongho exhaled. Baijin said, "There is a practice in this temple." Xiongho looked up. Baijin said, "If you must track, track like a gardener." Xiongho frowned. Baijin continued, "A gardener checks the soil. Yes. The gardener notices weather. Yes. But the gardener does not scream at the seed. The gardener does not punish the tree for being slow. The gardener provides conditions, then trusts growth." He said, "If you want deep sleep, create conditions. Darkness, warmth, quiet, a calm mind. Then trust the body. The body knows." Xiongho's eyes closed briefly. Baijin said, "And one more thing. The number is not the night. The number is a shadow of the night." Xiongho opened his eyes. Baijin spoke slowly. "A shadow can guide you, but if you stare at the shadow, you miss the moon." Xiongho swallowed. Baijin said, "Your ring might say you did not get enough deep sleep. But what if you felt rested? What if your day went well? What if your mood was stable? What if you were kind? Would you still call the night bad?" Xiongho's lips parted. He realized how often he had felt fine until he checked the score. He said quietly, "Sometimes I feel okay. Then I check. Then I feel worried." Baijin nodded. "That is the second arrow," he said. "Life gives you a night. The mind adds a verdict. The verdict creates suffering." Xiongho leaned back against the wall. He said, "So what do I do in the morning?" "I always check the second I wake." Baijin said, "Not tomorrow. Not later. The next time you wake, you can delay the check." Xiongho frowned. Baijin smiled. "Not forever. Just delay," he said. "You do not drink tea the second you open your eyes. You let the body wake. You breathe. You stretch. You let the mind arrive gently." He said, "Give yourself a window, even 10 minutes. Wake first as a human, not as a report. Xiongho's shoulders lowered again. Beijing said, in that window, notice your own inner measures. How do you feel? Is the mind sharp or foggy? Is the body heavy or light? Is the heart tense or calm? Those measures matter. Xiongho nodded slowly. Beijing stood. Come, he said. Let us return you to bed. The night is still here. They walked back through the dim hallway. Lanterns glowed softly. The baskets were still. As they passed, Xiongho looked at his phone in the basket. He did not reach for it. Beijing noticed and did not praise him. Praise could become another number. They returned to the sleeping room. Xiongho lay down again. Beijing sat at the far end as before. The traveller lay on their mat and listened. In the darkness, Xiongho whispered once, barely audible. We do not chase sleep, Beijing whispered back. We invite it. Minutes passed. The room became quieter. The traveller felt their own body heavier, as if the story itself was lowering them into the mattress. Beijing began speaking again, not loudly, not sharply, but like a steady river. He spoke to the room, to the traveller, to Xiongho, to anyone listening at home with insomnia and racing thoughts, anyone who wanted a calm mind and deep sleep. Many people are tired, he said, not only tired in the body, tired in the mind, because the mind has become a manager, a judge, a scoreboard. He continued, a sleep story for adults is not here to make you perfect. It is here to help you stop managing the night. The room stayed still. Beijing said, if you notice your mind trying to measure, you can simply name it. Measuring, judging, comparing. Then you let it pass. He paused. Because sleep is not earned by evaluation. Sleep arrives when the nervous system feels safe. The traveller's eyes grew heavier. Beijing continued. Some people worry about sleep because they worry about aging, about health, about how long the body will last. They think if they get the perfect sleep, they can control time. His voice stayed soft, but time does not listen to our fear. The traveller's mind caught the phrase perfect sleep to control time. It reminded them of people they knew, friends who spoke constantly about longevity, supplements, routines, biohacks, anti-aging. Beijing said, tonight we set down the numbers. Tomorrow we can look again if we must, but now we rest, he added. And in the next part of our journey, we will meet someone who has spent years trying to bargain with time itself. The traveller's breath slowed. Beijing's voice became even softer. A visitor will arrive at Moonmine Temple with pockets full of pills and a mind full of fear about getting older. The traveller barely heard the words, already drifting. Beijing said, and we will offer that visitor a simple bowl of rice and a teaching about enough. The room was quiet again. Lantern light faded into dark. The ring was covered. The numbers slept. And the night, unmeasured, began to hold the body the way it always had. Long before anyone tried to score it, the room was dim. The mats were still. Breath moved quietly through sleeping bodies. The ring was covered. The numbers slept. And the night, unmeasured, began doing what night does best, holding the mind until it stops gripping. Beijing sat at the far end of the sleeping room, watching the lantern light fade. He spoke softly, not to wake anyone, but to guide the ones who were still awake, the ones who were listening from their beds at home, the ones who needed insomnia relief and could not stop racing thoughts, the ones who wanted deep sleep and did not know how to stop trying. There is another kind of restlessness, he said. It does not come from the phone. It does not come from the numbers. It comes from fear of time. The traveller's eyes were closed, but the words entered anyway, like warm air under a door. Beijing continued, slow and steady. Some people do not only want sleep, he said. They want control. They want certainty. They want to bargain with aging. They want to be promised more years. He paused. And the more they chase more years, the more they lose tonight. A soft wind pressed against the paper window. The pond outside was still. The traveller felt their body heavy and warm. Then footsteps came from the hallway. Not rushed, not sneaking, but uneasy. The sound of someone arriving at the wrong hour, carrying too much. Beijing stood and slid the door open with care. A man stood there in the dim hallway. He was older than the traveller, not old, but past the point where a person believes time will wait. His hair was neatly cut, though a few silver strands showed. His face was clean, but his eyes looked tired in a very specific way. Not just tired from work, tired from scanning life for danger. He held a bag. The bag looked heavy. He bowed politely. "I am sorry," the man whispered. "I know it is late." Baijin's voice was calm. "The gate is open," he said. "Come in." The man stepped into the sleeping room. He saw the mats, the quiet bodies, the dimness, and he hesitated as if he did not know how to be in a room where nothing was being done. He looked at Beijing's face. Then he whispered, "I cannot sleep." Beijing nodded. "You are not the first." The man swallowed. "My heart feels tight," he said. "I keep thinking about health, about my body, about what happens next. I cannot stop checking things." Beijing pointed to the far side of the room, where a mat was empty. "Lie down," he said. "We speak softly." The man looked at the mat, then at his bag. He sat down, but he did not lie down. He opened the bag and pulled out a small pouch, then another, then another. Small bottles, packets, a sleep mask, a roll of tape, a tiny device like a clip, a sheet of paper with neat handwriting. The man placed everything in front of him like a surgeon setting tools. Beijing watched without judgment. After a moment, Beijing asked, "What are these?" The man's voice was careful, as if admitting something embarrassing. "Supplements," he whispered. "Magnesium, glycine, melatonin, something for inflammation, something for blood sugar, something for longevity, something for stress." He paused and added, "I know it sounds ridiculous." Beijing shook his head gently. "It sounds common," he said. The man blinked. Beijing continued, "Many people are trying to live longer by fighting the night." The man looked down at the bottles again. "My friend died," he said quietly. 54, heart attack. It happened quickly. Then I began reading everything. Sleep, diet, exercise, stress. I bought the ring. I bought the tracker. I cut out sugar. I tried to optimize everything. He exhaled. "And now I am exhausted." Beijing listened. The man said, "I am doing everything, but I cannot sleep. I keep thinking, if I do not sleep well, I will get sick. If I get sick, I will lose years. I will lose my mind. I will lose everything." His voice trembled slightly on the word everything. Beijing lowered his gaze, as if honoring the fear beneath the words. Then he said softly, "What is your name?" The man hesitated. "Daeho," he said. Beijing nodded. "Daeho," he said, "come with me." Daeho looked surprised. Beijing gestured toward the hallway. "The sleeping room is for sleeping," he said, "but your mind is loud. We will not bring your loud mind into this room." He spoke kindly, not as rejection, but as care. "Come," he said again. Daeho gathered his items quickly, the way people do when they feel exposed. He stuffed them back into the bag and followed Beijing out into the hall. They walked past dim lanterns, past the shelf where phones slept in baskets, past the hall of quiet darkness. The air was cooler here, the silence deeper. Beijing led Daeho to a small kitchen room where the stove was warm. A pot sat on the fire. The smell of rice and broth filled the air, simple and grounding. Beijing motioned for Daeho to sit at a low table. Daeho sat and looked around, as if unsure what he was supposed to do. Beijing placed a bowl in front of him. Not fancy, just a bowl. Warm rice, a little broth, a few slices of radish, enough to comfort the body. Daeho stared. "I should not eat at night," he whispered. "It affects insulin. It affects sleep quality." Beijing looked at him gently. "Are you hungry?" he asked. Daeho hesitated. His stomach answered with a small sound. Daeho's face tightened with embarrassment. Beijing said, "Then eat." Daeho frowned. "But the rules?" Beijing nodded slowly. "Rules can guide," he said, "but fear is not a guide." He added, "Your nervous system is already in alarm. Tonight you do not need more alarm." Daeho picked up the spoon, like someone doing something forbidden. He took a small bite. Warmth spread through his mouth. He blinked. It tasted like something he had forgotten. Not a supplement, not a calculation. Food. Beijing watched his face soften. Beijing said, "Many people come here with pockets full of pills and a mind full of fear." Daeho swallowed. Beijing continued. "They think longevity is achieved by tightening the grip." He tapped the table lightly once. Tap. "Your grip is what is keeping you awake," he said. Daeho's eyes filled with frustration. "But what am I supposed to do?" he asked. "Just stop caring. Just accept getting old. Just accept dying." Beijing did not answer quickly. He poured warm tea into a cup and slid it toward Daeho. Then he asked, "Do you know the difference between caring and clinging?" Daeho shook his head. Beijing said, "Caring is washing your hands. Clinging is washing your hands until they bleed." Daeho stared. Beijing said, "Caring is choosing food that helps your body. Clinging is turning every meal into a courtroom." Daeho's mouth tightened because it was true. Beijing continued, "Caring is listening to your body. Clinging is interrogating your body." He looked at Daeho's bag. "Caring is taking medicine when you need it. Clinging is carrying fear in a bottle." Daeho looked down. He whispered, "I just want more time." Beijing nodded. "That desire is human," he said. "But what you are doing is trying to buy time with fear." Daeho's eyes lifted. Beijing said, "Fear is expensive." He let that sit. In the quiet kitchen, the stove cracked softly. Daeho ate another bite of rice. Beijing asked, "Do you remember a time when you slept well?" Daeho frowned, searching his memory. "When I was younger," he said, "before I knew so much." Beijing nodded. "And what changed?" he asked. Daeho answered without thinking. "I started reading," he said. "I started tracking. I started worrying." Beijing said, "So you gained knowledge and lost rest?" Daeho looked ashamed. Beijing shook his head. "No shame," he said. "Only clarity." He said, "There is a sickness that comes from not knowing, and there is a sickness that comes from knowing too much without wisdom." Daeho swallowed. Beijing continued, "Some people think the problem is aging, but often the problem is terror." Daeho whispered, "Terror of what?" Beijing answered plainly, "Of losing control," he said, "of not being able to guarantee outcomes, of uncertainty." Daeho's throat tightened. "Yes," he said. Beijing said, "Then we begin there." He placed the teacup closer. "Drink," he said. Daeho drank. Beijing asked, "Do you want a story?" Daeho nodded. Beijing began, slow and steady. "There was once a man named Jun Seok," Beijing said. "He lived in the city and was very successful. He built companies. He invested well. He was praised for discipline. When Junseok turned 50, he became afraid. He saw his parents aging. He saw friends getting sick. He saw his own body changing. So he decided to defeat time. He hired experts, doctors, trainers, nutritionists. He bought devices that measured his sleep. He bought devices that measured his heart. He bought devices that measured his steps, his breathing, his recovery. He took supplements in the morning. He took supplements in the afternoon. He took supplements at night. He carried pill bottles like charms. At first he felt strong. He felt proud. He thought, I am doing it. I am controlling it. But then something happened. He stopped sleeping. At night his mind became a courtroom. He slept 5 hours and felt guilty. He slept 7 hours and still felt anxious. He slept 8 hours and checked the graph and saw a dip and panicked. Each number became a prophecy. He began waking in the night to check the data. He began thinking, what if I am dying? His fear grew. His sleep shrank. His body grew more tired. One night, Junseok sat on the edge of his bed and began crying like a child. Not because he was weak, because he was exhausted. The next day, he went to a small temple in the mountains and asked to see a monk. The monk who met him was very plain. No special robe, no dramatic voice. He looked like someone who had swept floors his whole life. Junseok poured out his story. He said, I am doing everything. I am trying to live longer. I am trying to be healthy. But I am terrified. I cannot sleep. I cannot stop measuring. I cannot stop thinking about death. The monk listened quietly. Then the monk asked, why do you want more years? Junseok frowned. So I can enjoy life, he said. The monk nodded. And are you enjoying life now? Junseok opened his mouth, then closed it. No, he admitted. The monk said, you are trying to buy more years while losing the year you are living. Junseok stared. The monk continued. He said, come, eat. He brought Junseok a simple bowl of rice. Junseok said, I cannot. It is not optimal. The monk smiled. He said, then you are not eating rice. You are eating fear. Junseok sat down and ate the rice. It was warm. It was simple. And for the first time in months, his body relaxed. The monk asked, do you know what this bowl is? Junseok said, food. The monk said, it is also enough. Junseok frowned. The monk said, your fear begins when you forget the meaning of enough. You keep adding because you believe adding will save you, but the adding is drowning you. Junseok whispered, but I do not want to die. The monk nodded. No one wants to die, he said, but your fear of death is making you stop living. Then the monk said something Junseok never forgot. He said, you cannot control time, but you can befriend it. Junseok asked, how? The monk pointed to a candle. He said, the candle does not scream at the darkness. It simply burns. He pointed to the rice bowl. He said, the bowl does not demand the rice stay forever. It receives it, then lets it go. He pointed to Junseok's chest. He said, your breath does the same. It arrives. It leaves. It returns. It does not panic about the next breath. Junseok began crying again, softer this time, because he understood. He had turned his life into a battle, and battles make the body tense. A tense body does not sleep well. The monk said, tonight you will not measure anything. Junseok panicked. But what if I do not recover? The monk said, you will recover better without panic. Then the monk took Junseok's devices and placed them in a box. He did not throw them away. He did not shame him. He simply gave Junseok a night without judgment. That night, Junseok slept. Not perfectly, not with a score, but with enough quiet. And in the morning, the monk said, "You see, your body knows. Your fear was the thief." Junsuk returned to the city. He still exercised. He still ate carefully. But he stopped worshipping numbers. He stopped turning sleep into a contest. And when he woke at night, he stopped checking. He listened instead. He listened to breath. He listened to silence. He listened to what his body was asking for. And slowly, his fear loosened. Not because he became immortal, because he became present. Baijin finished the story. Daiho sat in the warm kitchen, holding his spoon, breathing slower. He looked down at his bag and said quietly, "I am Junsuk." Baijin nodded. "Many people are Junsuk," he said. Daiho whispered, "I thought fear would protect me." Baijin said, "Fear protects you from a tiger." He paused, "But fear does not protect you from time." Daiho's eyes filled. "What do I do?" he asked. "I cannot stop thinking about aging." Baijin answered gently. "You do not have to stop thinking," he said. "You have to stop obeying every thought." Daiho looked up. Baijin said, "A thought can be true and still not useful at midnight." Daiho breathed out slowly. Baijin continued, "Yes, the body changes. Yes, we will not be here forever. But you do not need to solve death at 3 in the morning." Daiho said, "It feels like if I do not think about it, it will surprise me." Baijin nodded. "That is the mind's trick," he said. "It believes worry is preparation." He leaned in slightly. "Worry is not preparation," he said. "Worry is rehearsal for suffering." Daiho's face softened, as if hearing a sentence he needed. Baijin asked, "Do you know what helps people live longer in a way that matters?" Daiho waited. Baijin said, "Peace, connection, purpose, a calm nervous system, a heart that is not always in alarm." He added, "You cannot supplement your way out of terror." Daiho looked down. Baijin said, "Tonight, let us practice enough." Daiho frowned. Baijin pointed to the bowl. "That bowl," he said, "it is enough." He pointed to the tea. "That warmth," he said, "it is enough." He pointed to the night. "That darkness," he said, "it is enough." Daiho whispered, "I do not feel enough." Baijin nodded. "Then we will not argue with that feeling," he said. "We will simply sit with it until it changes shape." Daiho stared at the candle. Baijin said, "Do you know what people fear when they chase longevity?" Daiho answered, "Dying." Baijin said, "Yes, and also not being in control." He added, "And also not having lived." Daiho looked up quickly. Baijin said, "Some people fear death because they postponed life." Daiho's throat tightened. Baijin continued softly, "They think more years will fix the emptiness, but the emptiness is not fixed by years. It is filled by presence." Daiho whispered, "How do I find presence?" Baijin said, "By being here." Daiho looked around. The simple kitchen, the warm bowl, the candle, Beijin's calm face, the quiet sound of the temple breathing in the mountain. Daiho said quietly, "I have been living in the future." Beijin nodded. "And the future is never satisfied," he said. "It always asks for more, more control, more certainty, more years." He added, "The present is different. The present offers one thing. This." Beijin tapped the table gently again. "Tap." He said, "This is how you return." Daiho asked, "Do I stop tracking?" Beijin said, "Not necessarily, but you stop using data to punish yourself." He continued, "If you must track, track in daylight, like a gardener checking soil, not like a judge sentencing you." He said, "At night, your job is simpler. Make conditions, darkness, quiet, warmth, then trust the body." Daiho looked down at his hands. "They shake," he said. Beijin said, "Then they shake." Daiho looked up, surprised. Beijin said, We do not fight shaking with shaking. He took a slow breath in. He let it out longer. Daiho followed. Beijing said, "This is how the body learns safety again." Daiho's shoulders lowered. He whispered, "I am so tired of trying." Beijing nodded. "Then let the trying rest," he said. Daiho looked toward the window. The moonlight on the pond was still visible through the paper. Beijing said, "Do you want to walk outside for a moment?" Daiho hesitated. Beijing added, "Not far, just to hear something." Daiho nodded. They stepped out into the temple grounds. The air was cold and clean. The sky was wide. The pond reflected the moon. Beijing walked along the stone path. As they walked, Daiho spoke softly. "I read that stress ages you," he said. Beijing nodded. "Stress can wear the body," he said. "Yes," Daiho said. "So I try to eliminate stress," Beijing said. "And in trying, you create more." Daiho looked down, ashamed. Beijing said, "Not shame, just truth." They stopped near a small bridge. Below the bridge, water flowed through rocks. Not loud, not gentle like a trickle. A low, steady sound. A deep rumble like the mountain's own breath. Daiho listened. The sound did not demand attention. It did not ask him to think. It simply existed. Beijing said, "This sound has been here long before you." He paused. "And it will be here long after." Daiho's chest tightened, then softened. Beijing continued, "The water does not fear time. It moves with time." Daiho listened more closely. The sound felt like it entered his bones. Beijing said, "Some people think peace comes from controlling everything." He pointed down at the water. "But water teaches another way." Daiho whispered, "Just flow." Beijing nodded. "Just flow," he repeated. Then he added, "And in the next part of our journey, we will follow this sound more deeply." Daiho looked up. Beijing said, "Because sometimes the mind needs an anchor." He said, "Not a screen, not a number, not a pill." He tapped the wooden railing lightly. "Tap," he said. A simple sound, a steady river, a low hum that tells the nervous system, "You are safe." Daiho stood very still, listening to the water. The traveler, back in the sleeping room, drifted deeper, as if the river sound traveled through the walls and into their bed. Beijing's voice became softer, almost merging with the night.